Let's start with the legal and the security aspects of the requests or the demands or the conditions that the Ndimande brothers are setting. And here is expert advocate Deon. Deon, good morning to you and thanks for being with us. There's so many permutations to this case, and I want to start out with this one very quickly. From a housekeeping perspective, why go for extradition and not deportation? The supposition is, they got into the country illegally, and even though you can stay in eSwatini for up to 30 days as a South African without a visa, you still have to get your passport stamped, no?
As far as the... Good morning, sorry, Iman. As far as the domestic laws of Swaziland, eSwatini are concerned, those issues will be relevant in respect of the manner in which the Ndimande brothers will be returned to South Africa. The SADC protocol that we are a signatory to indicates how the SADC countries are to manage such affairs between each other. It is there specifically for the purposes of expediting any process of extradition, to the extent that under our Extradition Act, there are various procedures that have to be followed, which have been to a large extent streamlined in terms of the SADC protocol that we are a signatory to, and which Swaziland as well is a signatory to. So in my view, the deportation aspect will be something that can be decided between the two countries to the extent that it may be necessary or relevant. I think in this instance it would be far more prudent for the NPA to pursue the procedure that has been set out in the SADC protocol for extradition, if that does not cause an unnecessary delay, because they would very much like the Ndimande brothers back in South Africa so that they can be arraigned together with the other members that have been arrested in respect of this. So, but the one aspect is something that is dealt with internally by the country's government. That would be Swaziland, and then of course the other aspect is something that is now on a much more international level, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And that would be to rendition these gentlemen across borders.
So let's come to what we're terming the conditions that they're placing on the table, Deon, for the extradition request to go through. And we'll get to the filing from South Africa in just a moment. One of those conditions is for their lawyers to be with them every step of the way, and that they are not handed over to SAPS, but rather to correctional services officials. What happens in cases where it seems a suspect is genuine and can be argued has a legitimate concern about, that the police would be dangerous to them or that they would not be safe in the custody of police?
Iman, I think the main thing about the conditions that have been set by these gentlemen is the fact that I cannot see anything particularly wrong with asking that your lawyer be present during an extradition process, to the extent that your lawyer is not interfering with the duties that have to be performed in that instance. Furthermore, handing them over to the South African police services is by and large not something that will happen in the manner that the Ndimande brothers may expect. You are handed over to the investigating officer. He may be assisted by a contingent of uniformed officers or something, or some grouping to that effect. But you are handed over to the investigating officer, who then has to take you into his custody and make sure that you get to where you have to go. Whether correctional services is prepared to attend and assist with that is up to them. It is not something that can be asked, because these are two different spheres of government. And they are independent of each other. I doubt very much there is nothing wrong with asking correctional services, are you prepared to send people to the border or wherever this exchange will take place in order to facilitate custody, not take custody, facilitate it. Because correctional services technically can only take custody of you with a court order. And in this instance, these gentlemen are still presumed innocent until they are proven guilty in a court of law, and therefore they have to be handed over to the authority that has custody of them, and that is the South African Police Services. But invariably, in order to, if there is a legitimate concern concerning their safety, there are measures that can be measures that can be put in place in order to mitigate that risk to the extent possible.
What would that be?
It must be a credible risk. Sorry, ma'am.
What could it be?
Pardon?
So to mitigate the risk, what could be put in place?
Well, as I said, that their attorneys are present, that the investigating officer is the person that they are handed over to. Whichever contingent of police officers is sent in order to assist him is also sent in order to secure their safety. And then, of course, there can be a request made to the Department of Correctional Services for whether they are prepared to send somebody or a contingent of people to go and assist the police in respect of these gentlemen, but they cannot take custody of them.
Yeah.
The custody issue is purely within the hands of SAPS. But there are various measures that can be put in place. The only concern that I have is that this cannot be used as a means to delay the extradition of the Ndimande brothers. As far as I am aware, there is not yet a formal extradition application that has been sent via the Department of International Relations to the eSwatini government who deals with these matters. So it may be prudent that that is first done, and then after that there can be an indication as to how this rendition into South Africa will possibly take place. But in principle, I don't have an issue with what has been asked. I just don't see it being practically possible unless everybody is prepared to make the necessary arrangements therefore.
All right. So given, as you say, there's a very specific legal framework that has to be adhered to in terms of the involvement of the SAPS and the way that handover is done, if there is a rejection of South Africa not being able to meet those, in inverted commas, conditions that the Ndimande brothers are setting, do they have a legal leg to stand on in saying, then we reject this extradition? I mean, could they reject the extradition? What scenarios do you foresee playing out? I mean, I'm just thinking of cases where, for example, a person who's supposed to be extradited says, I can't be extradited to a country that has the death penalty for the charges I'm facing, so you can't send me there. Is there any wiggle room for the Ndimande brothers should the South African government say no to those conditions?
Well, the process of extradition is kind of clear, and it is similarly set out in both the SADC protocol as well as the Extradition Act. The practical means of extradition is also something that has been crystallized over the years. We have a certain protocol that they follow, and it can to a certain extent be adapted by virtue of the circumstances. This not being extradited, or the manner in which you are to be extradited, like in this instance, the Ndimande brothers are alleging that their lives are not safe. It appears that they are pointing a finger at members of the South African police. Why that would be the case, I wouldn't know, but anything is possible. And but that would not preclude them from being extradited. They cannot raise that as a reason not to be extradited. Not being extradited to a country that has the death penalty is something that is written into the protocols as well as part of the Hague Convention and the Extradition Act. We don't have the death penalty, so we don't extradite you to a country that has the death penalty unless that country has agreed not to execute you. Then we can extradite you. But our constitution doesn't allow us to extradite people to countries where the person runs the risk of execution. So that's part of the legal process. You can't go to court in eSwatini and say, look, these people don't want to give me a police escort of my choice, so I'm not going anywhere. That's not going to fly. And the recourse that they may have would be to the High Court in eSwatini or to the Supreme Court or High Court in eSwatini to deal with that issue. But once again, that is a state's issue. It is a sovereign matter that is dealt with within the confines of the laws that apply. You've got the requesting state, which is us, and then you will have the requested state, which is eSwatini. And they have laws and rules that they apply in these instances, which apply in respect of extradition, as in, we cannot extradite you to a country that's going to put you to death, which is not the case here. And we have rules that we can then enforce in respect of that. So if eSwatini says, well, we're not going to send these people back to you because they don't get a police escort, then our recourse would be to take that either up with their Department of International Relations or to go to the same court and apply to that court to have that order set aside so that we can have custody of these gentlemen in terms of an agreement which is sovereign in its nature as well.
Yeah, Deon, so much really important and useful information there. We'll see how these two things play out in terms of the filing from South Africa and what happens after their appearance in the Magistrates Court today. Just a final question, and perhaps it goes to, we're expecting this big bail application hearing for some of the suspects. Of course, some of the suspects are already behind bars for other charges. Just talk to us how police eventually merge these charges on the murders of AKA and Tebello to the existing charge sheet. It sounds like it might just be quite a straightforward thing.
It is a very straightforward thing. The dockets are combined. There's already, from what I understand, the DPP in KwaZulu-Natal has already issued a certificate to combine all the dockets which are related to this issue. And that is why they've also charged, everybody's charged in terms of the Prevention of Organised Crime Act, which is the collective conduct of everyone, and then the common purpose aspect related to the eventual murder and everything that went with it, because not each person had a gun, not each person was necessarily present, but they all had an idea of what was going to be the end result. So all of these matters will be combined eventually, and one indictment will be drafted with all of the charges in it as they relate to the specific accused.
Thank you so much, Advocate Deon Poole, for your time and for sharing with us some really useful information on how these matters, as they converge and as they are seen individually as well, are likely to play out in court.